Hello, hello.
Hey, you hear me okay?
I hear you perfectly fine.
Nice.
Uh,
How's the video coming in?
Video's actually looking pretty fucking good. I kept trying to take it
Okay.
around with Skype after you showed me that video, and I was trying it early as well, but OBS Studio and Skype just have a very strong love-hate relationship with one another.
Yeah. That's no problem, no problem. I was a little bit worried that maybe the green screen behind was going to look a little bit weird since I don't typically show it much on stream, but I bet that's what's to be expected anyway, so.
No, I mean, it looks very classy over there on your side right now.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you can
sir.
see some sleeping cats in the back of mine, so
Nice.
just ignore Sapphire and Nina.
That's
Although
quality. See, that's quality content. Pets are good stuff on Twitch, so
I know
I'm envious.
Sapphire, the eldest cat, who is directly behind my shoulder, is a whole 19-year-old cat.
17.
Oh wow, 19. Okay.
Yeah, and she is a very vocal guest on my stream fairly often. She'll just always hop on my lap and be like, "Hold me," and she'll just
Oh, that's
be on my lap for like a good half an hour while I'm playing video games. And if I move too much, she'll just look at me like I'm being an asshole.
Oh, that's awesome.
But anyways, let's get to the purpose of tonight, which is going to be the interview, which, again, I want to thank you very much for being willing to take some time to let me ask you some of these questions. It's
Sure.
something I've been kind of interested in trying to start for like the past few months of interviewing either low-level streamers like myself or very quickly rising streamers, like people who are just get hit affiliate or on the path to partnership in a really fast
Sure.
track, and just try to, I don't know, just try to help them expose a little bit. I don't know, it's just something to do for a pastime. Don't really know much else about it, just a little hobby. I've been interested to start, but I'm finally going through with it.
It's awesome, and I'm happy to be here. So I appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, I think it's a great idea. Networking is probably the most important thing you can do if you're starting off on Twitch. So just being out there and connecting with other people is what it's all about. Especially
Exactly.
based on the way that Twitch is set up. You know, Twitch is kind of a weird setup, and we kind of rely on working with each other. So good for you, man. It's a great idea.
All right, so first question of the evening, which basically is going to be a lot of the same questions that I already sent you beforehand, so should be a little bit prepared. But what
Sure.
got you interested in Darkest Dungeon, and when was that?
God, that's a great question. So, yeah, if you're unfamiliar with my stream, I'm at twitch.tv/ElementFive, exactly as it's spelled. And yeah, I started streaming just going into Darkest Dungeon blind. I just really didn't know what to play. And I felt like with some of my health limitations and challenges, that Darkest Dungeon was a game that would have a pace that made sense to me. Something I could just kind of move into and just play it blind. So that's what we did. I just moved into it about 4 months ago and said, let's just learn it. I've always loved the art style of it, the narration by Wayne June, etc. I'm a little bit more of an intellectual person in general, so I kind of like puzzle games, thinking through things. And then you've got just the crazy visceral feel that Darkest Dungeon is able to provide in a 2D atmosphere, which is just crazy. It's kind of unmatched. It's a bit of a masterpiece, that game, in certain ways. So about 4 months ago is when I just decided I actually want to play and be good at this really challenging game. So if I stream it, if I jump into streaming and I just try it in front of people, I'll be forced to learn it, which is basically exactly what's happened. Because in about a month's time, we beat it and beat it on the easiest difficulty. And I immediately just got into playing modded stuff, checking out the modded community, doing that kind of stuff, and have made some really amazing relationships in that arena. And yeah, so 4 months ago is the official answer to your question, but I've always wanted to get good at it. It's been out, obviously, for a couple years now. So
With the 4 months being how long your stream has been up and running right now, it's a very noticeable atmosphere to your entire stream setup once you get in there. The whole mech robo, like almost want to say Pacific Rim sort of feel to your entire
Sure.
stream. What was the inspiration, or what like came to your mind to think that this is the direction you want to take your stream? This is one of the atmosphere. This is the feeling you want your viewers to have to associate with ElementFive.
That's a great question. This is, I think, one of the harder questions for me to answer. It's one I get fairly often, which is, what the hell does ElementFive mean? Where does it come from? etc. What's the robot stuff about? So bear with me on this, but I feel like so I have several health limitations. Actually, I got into Twitch a couple years ago, right as I started losing a lot of control of my nervous system. I lost vision in my eye a few years ago.
Oh,
so
damn.
so there's just a lot of things that happened. I also have I'm severe asthmatic. I've got all this weird stuff that kind of came together in one piece, and I found that games have always been an escape for me, but Twitch was one of those really potent escapes where I got to just meet people who cared about the same stuff, etc., etc. Throughout the process of rehabilitation and sort of getting better and regaining as much of my health as I could, Twitch was that outlet, and I just sort of found. I found through a lot of trauma therapy, actually, a piece of myself that I felt like was something that was there that I'd never really grasped onto. So that to me became, in a weird way, sort of the fifth element. It became this thing that was like an energy that it was like this unknown piece of me that if I just could throw reins on and let ride for a while, I could just move through a lot of the crap that I was dealing with in my life. So the Fifth Element is a movie that I love, and so that's a piece of it. But to me, it was kind of just more of the mythos of that fifth element, the missing piece, the sort of just something within yourself so that's kind of like a little bit of the branding that I use is release the machine, and that's kind of the idea. It's just let go your inhibitions and just lean into life is something I talk about a lot. Just leaning in and letting the net present itself. So that started with sort of a name of Fifth Element, kind of a mantra, a means to kind of move through a lot of the crap that I was. And then I met some really great artists. They gave me some great concepts, and I really gravitated towards the idea of robotics and the idea of something that is sort of mechanistic, something that you could cut through a lot of the emotionality and just go hard on. So I don't know if that's the greatest explanation behind how it all started, but I've loved it ever since. I really enjoy the sort of Pacific Rim aesthetic, the concept of mechs and things like that. And I love that kind of, to me, personified, it sort of solidified a sense of that essence, that energy of just moving through all the trauma and the difficult things that I had dealt with in my life and just releasing the machine, just leaning into life and just trying it. And that's what getting on Twitch for me has been. That's what streaming has been all about. It's literally one of the most challenging and most terrifying things I've ever done. And it was also the vehicle for me to just escape a lot of the crap that I was dealing with and a lot of that trauma. So that's sort of where that came from. Thankfully, it's been received very well. And I've been lucky, I think, building a lot of the aesthetics and theming around my stream in that direction, and people seem to turn on to it, which is kind of fun.
That actually leads right into my next question. What has your overall reaction been to the ever-growing community that you have during your stream now, of not just other players interested in Darkest Dungeon, but the fact you have so many of the notable mods for the Pitch Black Dungeon on your stream all the time too? How has it been feeling to have this much of a pull already in the Darkest Dungeon community?
God, that is I mean, I kind of giggle when you say that, because again, I'm just a guy who learned to play this game 4 months ago and was fortunate enough to have some of the modders who make this content just appreciate the way I was playing it, the way I explained the way that I was going through it, and then more and more of them just kind of showed up and I think really appreciated the way that I gave an exposition to their characters and their content. So it's not even just, I mean, primarily right now we're playing a lot of Pitch Black Dungeon, which is an overhaul mod for Darkest Dungeon. Very challenging, but very rewarding game. Not a lot of people relate to it because it's not the vanilla game that a lot of people are used to, but it's very similar in a lot of aspects. But I also have a lot of modders, a part of my community. One of my channel mods, for example, is Muscarine, who is one of the most loved and hated content creators in that realm because of his artistic style. But it's blown me away, to be honest with you. I mean, in four short months, I have built a really amazing community around not just the game, but the content creators for that game and all the stuff that they've got. I mean, Claire, who's a phenomenal mod that I have in my channel, she's working on Moonlit Dungeon, which is another overhaul version, which is going to be insane. Marvin Seo is a really popular modder who's created the Seo special group. So the Thrall, the Lami, if you're These are really, really, really highly rated, popular modded classes. He hangs out all the time. He's been giving me a lot of exclusive leaks of his content that's coming out. He's got a new dungeon coming out. So, I mean, I am just an idiot streamer who tried to play this game, right? I'm like, sometimes people come into my channel and they say, are you a modder? Did you create some of this stuff? And the answer is nope. I'm like, literally, I'm just a guy who thought he would try his hack at Twitch. And I happen to have gotten very, very, very fortunate having some of the people who create this content come in and actually like the way I play it. And it's an absolute honor to be able to play this stuff in front of those guys and have them go, yeah, we should change that. That should probably be tweaked. That needs to be a little bit less powerful. That there's nothing more rewarding or more valuable than that to me. It's a dream. It's a dream come true, honestly. And the truth is, and I have to say this real quick too, the fact that these guys create content which enriches or enhances or changes the game, and they do it for free. I mean, they put so much money and sweat and tears and effort, and they take so much hate from so many trolls in the community. And the fact that they put this content out for free is amazing. I'm eternally grateful for the fact that they create content and they keep this game rolling. I mean, again, Moonlit Dungeon coming out, then Marvin Sayo's dungeon coming out after the DLC. I'm in heaven. It's a pretty amazing ride so far.
You're gonna have a lot of material to work with for quite some time.
Yeah. It's we've got a busy schedule, and I'm doing everything I can right now to just stay on course with Pitch Black Dungeon and beat it, because there's just so much to do. So,
All right, now this is a question that I feel has only one true appropriate answer, but I'm curious to see what yours is. Favorite character in Darkest Dungeon and your favorite character in Pitch Black Dungeon?
That's a great question. So yeah, there's a duality there, which is that in the base game of Darkest Dungeon, characters play a specific way, and then they're rebalanced for Pitch Black Dungeon. So that's a great question, because it was something you love in the base game does not necessarily translate to Pitch Black Dungeon the same way. My immediate impulsive answer is usually the Grave Robber. I love the Grave Robber just because of her style, because she's a shuffle play. So shuffle in Darkest Dungeon is an interesting thing because all the characters are sort of based around their positioning in the group. You know, you've got 4 characters, and if you have them back here versus up front, that changes a lot of their ability and their utility. And what I respect about the Grave Robber, it's kind of the original base game shuffle character that allows her to kind of jump around and stuff like that. So I just love her style too. She's a strong female character. It's kind of cool that she's a Grave Robber who has a pickaxe and throws daggers and stuff and deals with poisons and stuff like that. Somebody asked me the other day, if I was any Darkest Dungeon character, which one would I be? Which one would I self-identify as? And the only answer is the Houndmaster, because I have 3 dogs and because I look a little bit like it. Like, I am a redhead, and I do have a beard. I don't necessarily club people, but I definitely protect animals, and I protect people, and there's some guard stuff there. There's some healing stuff there. So the closest answer to who I self-identify as would be the Houndmaster. Houndmaster is probably the only other answer in terms of favorite base game character, and the reason is because the utility is unbelievable. I didn't play this class for a long time, and then I realized this is probably the only Darkest Dungeon character you can play from basically any position and in any group composition. So that would be my vanilla answer. I think actually in Pitch Black Dungeon, the Jester is probably maybe my favorite next to the Houndmaster, and the reason is because in Pitch Black Dungeon you have corpse mechanics, and the Jester has an ability to clear corpses really easily. There's a lot of corpse clear abilities in Pitch Black Dungeon, which is great. They've been kind of injected into the characters. But the Jester is also this is kind of just it's just a factor of the way that so Silvio built Pitch Black Dungeon, and the community built that without many stress healers. And stress is a huge piece of Pitch Black Dungeon. You get stressed out really fast. The economy is very tight, so you can't pay for the de-stress. So the Jester kind of becomes your solo major stress healer in that.
This is true.
So if you get into that game, if you try Pitch Black Dungeon out and you get an early Jester, you ride it hard as fast as you can and through as many dungeons as you can. You save as much money as you can. And until I really learned that, I had a really hard time in PvD. So I think those are my safe answers. Probably Houndmaster, Grave Robber, and probably the Jester. maybe. But Silvio, I think, wants you to love the Jester. So it's you're kind of reluctant to it a little bit. So
Uh, for the
how about you? What is your you said that there's only one right answer, and now I'm curious. What do you think that is? Because I love the occultist. Like the occultist is amazing, and I think a lot of people get tattoos of the occultist. The occultist has the 0 crit heal memes.
I know.
So it's amazing, but yeah.
But no, for me, what I feel is the only correct answer, because he is the most difficult character to make work in Darkest Dungeon.
Oh, the leper.
No.
No.
Abomination.
No, okay. Oh, the Abom.
Yeah, because
yeah.
at least with all the different DLCs that have come out, the only healer that can, like, true healer that can work with him is an occultist. And again, occultist is feast or famine with his heals, and the Abomination already has low bleed resist already, so the one healer that works with him has a good chance to cut him open. So you normally have to run like someone with Cure, so Plague Doctor, or even an Arbalist with Abomination. But the Abomination as a class itself is someone that I have always enjoyed. It's always angered me so much that I can't use a Vestal or a Flagellant or whatever with him. It's like, he has really good utility. He has good self heal and de-stressor. His double bile is actually really strong, especially with the debuff it applies afterwards too.
Yeah.
And if you ever need some just Hulk smash damage, the Abomination has always been a little bit of a soft spot for me, primarily because he's next to impossible to use.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great answer. I actually didn't expect that answer. If you hang around the Darkest Dungeon subreddit, it's pretty much all leper all day. So I expect, and because most people say the leper is the most useless character because it can't do anything with the back line and it's always missing, etc. But no, you're totally right, and that's an important point about Darkest Dungeon as a base game. As much as I love the vanilla game, one of the major complaints people have is the religiosity of it, in the sense that certain classes won't work with certain others. You literally just can't play them together, and that is a big limitation. It's interesting because it forces certain interactions and forces certain groups rather than just relying on the same thing over and over. But it's frustrating because you can't use certain classes in most combinations. So I think the Abom is a great answer. I definitely dig what you have to say there.
Now, the next one. This is kind of a follow-up of the previous question, but much more direct now. Favorite ability in Vanilla, Darkest Dungeon, and in Pitch Black?
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, if you've been watching any of the stream lately, then you probably know that my favorite ability is the Occultist Heal. Because in Pitch Black Dungeon, especially, and this is true of Darkest Dungeon if you get to the champion game in general, it's like as soon as you start to ascend the tiers of difficulty in Darkest Dungeon, you realize you have to adapt the gameplay in a lot of different ways. And one of those ways is, as you get to the champion game, the late game, level 5 and 6, you definitely need to respect guard because your characters can just be crit. You also need reliable big heals. And so the thing about the occultist is, I heard somebody said this the other day when there was an argument in chat about if the Vestal is better than the occultist. They said if the occultist couldn't 0 heal, I would take it nothing else all day. And that's an interesting point. But really, lately, at least in the playthrough that we're doing with Pitch Black Dungeon, I lean so hard on the occultist because it's also a mark class. It also clears corpses. It also has the ability to hit a back line. And then, the mechanics are changed a little bit in PBD. So you have the potential for stuns if you use some of the tentacle play. But the biggest thing is just if you get hit really hard, the occultist is the only one so far that just 74 crit heals and brings somebody back from the brink of death, So it's probably the occultist heal because if you've been watching anything recently, you've seen us lose some pretty sad group wipes to certain bosses and things like that. And unfortunately, and I'm being a bit of a hypocrite here, in both of those occasions, the occultist just didn't show up. We got really, really low heals or 2-0 heals. So it's my favorite, but also most hated ability probably in PBD. But there are some really, really great stuff. And the thing about Pitch Black Dungeon that is so smart is that they really set out to make a version of the game that you can't cheese, right? So as an example, you can't remove Mark with the Arbalist Flare. So you can't just cheese, you can't as easily cheese the Swine King. They changed the way that the Prophet works. So you can't just bring an occultist to it and constantly spam reduction of damage, and then just have it basically hit you with Nerf balls. Like it's
Hmm.
that's a really smart adaptation, and there's so many good answers there because all the abilities that are tweaked play really well. I mean, the other one again is the Jester. The Jester's bleed skill also has a corpse clear, so you can just lean so hard on that. But I guess in the base game, I would say in the base game, probably my favorite ability is maybe lunge with the grave robber because it's so fun, but also and I wish they hadn't have changed it because this is a really contentious one. But finale with the Jester is an amazingly stylistic thing too. The ability that you could, the fact that you can play a Jester as mostly a stress healer and a bleeder, but then also as this thing that dances around the stage and then has this amazing finale damage that shuffles it all the way back and he bows as the audience claps. I mean,
Hmm.
there's something so beautiful about that ability.
That
These things
ability
are not,
used to be like so incredibly powerful too. Like finale is
yes,
still a great ability, but
yeah,
after yeah, it was during the Crimson Court when they nerfed it because it used to have I think like 30% more base damage before the multipliers took place. So finale could
right,
crit people for like 80 damage
right.
beforehand, whereas now.
Yeah, and I think you used to have people who would start their groups with a position one Jester, open up with finale, and then just crush whatever's in the front line. I mean,
Hmm.
Red Hook has been smart to think about making the game more balanced, and they've done a lot of different balance changes that make a lot of sense. There's a lot they could still tweak about it. There's a lot that they could take a note from Pitch Black Dungeon from, I think. But yeah, that's one of them. I mean, I just think stylistically, it's a really cool ability. The first time you ever use finale and you see the Jester take this bow and you hear the audience cheer, you're like, that's really unique. That is
Hmm.
really cool. I mean, this is again, when you ask me favorites, my answers don't necessarily come from a place of utility or the best in the game or the most powerful, because there's a lot of things that exist, especially in the base game, but also in PBD, like the Hellions Yop, which is her scream that stuns the first two. I mean, that is insanely potently powerful. It's
Yeah.
probably way too
Its
powerful.
base
And
its base stun ratio is insane already. I mean,
it's
it's only a
exactly right.
debuff afterwards. That's all it is.
Right. Yeah, so once you start to get a little bit into the nitty-gritty of Darkest Dungeon, you get a little bit accustomed to knowing like you're gonna play a Hellion, it's gonna be rank 1, you're gonna spam Yop, you're gonna make sure that you can hit the back line with this and that. I mean, you start to lean on these abilities that are just so damn strong.
Hmm.
They're really hard to get away from. So usually when people ask me favorites, I think stylistic. I think you know not necessarily mechanistic, but what was the concept here and why is it cool? Hopefully I answered those questions.
Oh no, you certainly did.
Okay, good.
All right. What is the most terrifying monster in the game to you? Simply gameplay wise. What it could be a boss, it could just be just a specific mob monster. What is the most terrifying monster in the game for you to deal with?
So again, this will be different between Pitch Black Dungeon and base game. I'll say base game wise, in the vanilla game, there are a lot of monsters that people really dread. The Shambler's one of them, because if you summon the Shambler, you go into this crazy fight where it's totally pitch black in a cosmic arena and the stress is insane, and it's definitely kicked my ass a few times. Um, uh, a lot of people run into the Collector in the base game and they have no idea what it is, how to
Hmm.
deal with it, and every time they run into it, it freaks them out. These, however, are bosses that you can adapt to fairly well. You can get a little bit good about just kind of expecting when they're going to come and how they're going to come, et cetera, and how to get through them. For me, it's other popular answers are things like the Swine Skiver. So if you've ever played in the Champion game and you've gone into the Warrens, you'll run into this pig that has all these quills in its pack, and it just does ruthless damage. And this is one of those monsters that when you play Pitch Black Dungeon is severely nerfed, right? And Pitch Black Dungeon is supposed to be a more challenging, more interesting version of the game, and the fact that they nerfed it says something about just how in the vanilla game. On the other hand, though, some of the bosses that you see in Pitch Black Dungeon give me nightmares. If you saw our most recent streamer, we tried the Champion Prophet. I'm still traumatized from that fight because we got it literally down to 2 health out of 385 left, and then all 4 characters died. So 2 out of 385 doesn't leave you. You just that is permanently tattooed on you, and you walk out of there. So that's giving me nightmares. But normally in the base game, the Prophet just isn't. It's a joke. You don't care about it. So because you just bring in a cultist and weaken its damage. So I think the Swineskiver is a decent answer. There's also a Virago, which is a sort of the wheeled version of the Swineskiver. It's a really creepy, diseasey kind of blight oriented thing in the wheel that you can run into. That one's kind of challenging. Honestly, the next thing that I'm most worried about is the flesh. So the flesh boss, which is after the Swine God, it's very different in Pitch Black Dungeon because it cures itself. So if you play it in the vanilla game, you just bring a bleed group, maybe even throw in some blights, and because it has a shared health pool over 4 different heads, you can just spread those, and every single time a head takes a turn, it just ticks the entire amount, the total sum of damage. And that's an easy way to get through it. But in Pitch Black Dungeon, it cures itself. You can't bleed it. You actually have to bring stuns and shut the heads down. You got to mark the hearts. It is a completely different fight, but you can still just get 1 hit on that fight. I have no idea how we're going to go at it. It used to be things like the cannon. The cannon scares me a little bit because if you just mess up a little bit, you don't kill the matchman, that cannon's going to crush your team. I've had that happen a couple times.
It's in your intro highlight video. It's amazing.
Yes, that's exactly right. So that one is a little bit freaky, but yeah, ultimately I think the Prophet was a bit of was traumatizing, but I'm not looking forward to fighting the Flesh in Pitch Black Dungeon. That's I don't know how we're gonna approach that yet. So those are my answers. Could go on about that one, to be honest. That's the beauty of Darkest Dungeon, is that they made monsters and bosses challenging, terrifying, and really, like, you really have to think about adapting to them. And even if you do, you've still got to be a little bit lucky. You know, you still got to get things moving in the right direction and hope you don't get just crit. So yeah, beautiful game. Terrifying.
Me, I get terrified whenever I'm in the cove and I see any group that has a thrall in it. I'm just like, oh no. And they'll still have those two little I can't remember what the actual names are, but little shamans that stress the fuck out of your party. And the backs is like, all right, do I value stress or do I value hit points? Because I have to deal with one, but I can't do both.
Stress mobs is a great answer because if you're not respecting stress, you just lose everything, you know. I mean, and that's how we lost the whole group wipe to the Prophet the other day. Was I didn't expect the champion Prophet to literally afflict my entire group. And when it has 2 HP left out of 385, one character that would have virtued rather than had an affliction, one character that I would have been able to control rather than doing something uncontrollable because of that affliction, means we would have killed that boss and had 4 characters left. So you have to respect stress. I think that's a really, really good answer too.
All right, so finish this sentence. You were finishing a rest, and you did not prevent nighttime ambush. You wake up and find a party of blank and instantly shit yourself.
Oh, easy. So this is a perfect segue, right? Because if you don't prevent ambush and you get ambushed, you wake up with no light. So if you wake up with no light, that means extra crits coming your way. That means extra stress coming your way. The worst group I've run into, I think, thus far in Pitch Black Dungeon. We did a single dungeon run where we summoned and killed 3 Swine Kings and a Veteran Collector in the same run, and it was an unbelievably kick butt run. I mean, it felt so great, but we almost lost it all because we turned a corner into what's called a damnable group. So one of the mobs has a damnable affix, right? So these affixes exist in PvD, kind of like Diablo. It forced us to have 0 torchlight, so it immediately brought us to Pitch Black. Stress was massive, but the group composition was a ghoul, okay, and then 2 stress witches. So it was like, not only is there no light here, you're going to get crit, and you're going to get howled, and you're going to get massively stressed. And literally, it broke the entire team. I had 2 death's doors. Somebody broke with an affliction. I mean, 3 Swine Kings were no sweat compared to this thing. So if you wake up in an ambush after you've camped, I mean, the reason you camp is to clean your group up, to get them buffed, to bring the stress down. If you wake up in an ambush, half the time you wish you didn't camp in the first place. If you wake up in that ambush and it's something like a ghoul and a bunch of stressors, you really wish you didn't camp in the first place, because now you're just paying for it. So that's probably my best answer. But I think, you know, there are other things you could wake up to that would be terrifying. A skiver would be one of those things. Even a swinotar in certain cases, swinotars can be pretty damaging. especially if you get shuffled, right? The worst part about waking up in an ambush, in my opinion, is the fact that you spend an entire turn just shuffling your team back into
Mm-hmm.
place, and you never get the advantage. So yeah, I would probably say waking up to a ghoul in pitch black that crits me, with some witches behind it is probably an immediate, can I escape? Can I just retreat? So that's the answer I'm going to go with, at least for now.
You actually kind of brought up leading into my next question. In Pitch Black Dungeon, something that has been very noticeable is the fact that they have all these different types of monsters that have like these little traits before their names, which is a throwback to like Diablo 2, where you would have a bunch of monsters that have these small little quirks about them that made them more potentially stronger. Which
Right.
one of those little quirks or little titles do you find to be the easiest to deal with and the most difficult to deal with?
Oh, that's a really good question. So our first run, okay, so we just talked about the damnable affix, right? So what you're talking about in PBD is these affixes, these little attributes that are randomly generated in many cases for the different mobs you run into. And it is exactly like Diablo 2 or 3, where I when I lost my first hardcore character in Diablo 3, I think it was like a teleporting laser something affix that was just so brutal, and I got trapped and just burned to death. So it's similar to that feel. You walk into a group, and that's what's great about Pitch Black Dungeon is every single group makes you adapt and puzzle solve in a little bit of a different way, little different priority system. So some of these affixes are terrifying. Some of them are kind of laughable, and others are really, really tricky. Probably one of the most terrifying is the charming affix, because it literally works exactly like the siren. You know that if you don't get a stun or kill the charmer, you're gonna lose one of your team, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you fight the siren enough, if you fight the, because we farm that mini boss pretty regularly, you know that if, say, a Dismas, a highwayman, gets taken from your team and then crits and bleeds one of your characters, you're screwed. So the first time we walked into a champion dungeon, everybody told me it's going to be a wipe fest in Pitch Black Dungeon. Don't don't even think about it. Like, this is where other streamers just quit the game, is when they get into champion PvD play. The first group we walked into was a charmer, and it stole my hound mask. So literally just took like a 5-minute breather, and I had to just think about how the hell I was going to survive that group. That is very different to something like a loot shifter. Okay, so a loot shifting is literally has a different loot table that changes per turn. It has no added benefits. It has no added. I don't think it does, at least. I mean, I could look back at the glossary. The glossary is huge for these.
Don't think it
affixes.
does either.
Yeah. What just happened here? You still seeing me?
Oh, I still see you.
Okay, good. Yeah, my computer just wigged out there. Sorry about that.
No, you're
Okay,
good.
yeah. So now we've got the computer affixed too. I feel like I actually just got attacked by a damnable because all the lights went out. So yeah, a damnable is another really great, because as I said, you can absolutely do fine and be almost mechanistic moving through Pitch Black Dungeon. But if you turn a corner into a wrong group, the lights go out. It's a huge stressor. It just changes the whole thing. We ran into one really interesting one the other night in our attempt on the Prophet, which was called Realm Defying, and literally it summoned three enemies from the darkest dungeon, right? So the highest tier enemies, and then it's like you're in front of this otherworldly cosmic background that's spinning, and if you don't kill the Realm Defier, it just resummons them. It resummons everything. It just continually
Ooh.
resurrects everything that you're fighting. So that one was pretty scary. That was kind of like one of those, like that was kind of like a deer in the headlights. Stood there and thought about it for about 30 seconds and didn't know what the hell I was playing. So yeah, I mean, the easier ones are ones that just have to do with loot, or they have to do with maybe even healing in many cases. They just don't have the potent mechanics that take over your teammates, that crush your torch, that like Deadeye is something we walk into all the time on like certain ranged characters.
Mm-hmm.
Second you get Deadeye, you know that a lot of range damage or even a big crit might be coming your way. So you know to prioritize that. Second you run into something that is loot shifting, you kind of laugh at it and go, it's a nice concept, but it's not really that interesting. So, yeah.
And now we're going to delve into the mind of ElementFive. If you
Okay.
could create your own character in Darkest Dungeon, what would it be and what would it play like?
Oh my goodness. I should have prepared an answer for this one. I have been asked this so many times. It's such a damn good question. Uh, so right now, one of my channel mods and one of the content creators, Hooded Lay, is working on a character that I had an idea for a long time ago, that I thought would be really cool, but it wasn't a mechanic that existed at the time. She's working on a kind of ninja that works specifically around stealth, kind of a rogue class.
Okay.
There are a lot of like assassin-y classes. There's even AJ's Action Jack's assassin class, which is pretty cool. The Highwayman is pretty neat. With the Shield Breaker DLC, we actually saw cloaking as a mechanic come into the game. It is something that you have to deal with. The Grave Robber gets cloak in a couple of her abilities, at least in PvD, which is interesting, but there's not much you can do with it. I don't see people capitalize on it. Nobody seems to really know anything about it. So I'm very, very excited to see the realization of that concept come through the talented work of Hooded Lay and Oh Nightmare. They both worked on a modded class called the Werewolf, which is another one of my favorite classes. I really have a thing for transformation classes. Transformation classes are something that are incredibly hard for people to create and program. If you ask Muscarine about this stuff, for example, the last class he made was a transformation class called the Shrapnel, and he was so fed up with the transformation system, he was like, I'm done, I'm out of the modded thing, I can't do it anymore. So this is why the Abomination was weird. People wanted a werewolf, and they said, well, we'll give you something close. It's an abomination, and people are not necessarily happy with what it is for a lot of different reasons, the reasons you brought up, but at least that mechanic exists. The transformation is a piece there, so we can mod that. So I would probably go in a direction of transformation. One of my favorite modded classes is Marvin Sayo's Lamia. Lamia is an amazing healer and stress healer, and then she turns into a snake, stresses out the rest of your party like the Abomination does in a similar way, and has a ton of offensive utility. Not a lot of people know how to use her. Not a lot of people use her as a snake. So many people come into my chat and they say, I've never seen anybody go snake, and we're doing it nightly, you know? Like, this is something that is so much fun, and at the right time has actually saved things. We took on a cannon boss where literally everybody missed the matchman, and it was about to light the cannon. We missed the stun on the matchman, and the cannon had 11 HP left, and we could decide either we go full in at the cannon and kill it before the matchman lights it and it crushes our whole team, or we try to get to the matchman in some other way. Literally, I popped Snake, I got out of her healer form, and she dealt the damage blow. We did 12 damage to 11 left in that cannon, and she saved the party. So transformation characters are amazing. They are a lot of fun, and the thing about them that is kind of cool too is that you don't have to. They come off the stagecoach with all of their abilities already unlocked, because they're either in form A or form B, basically. So you don't have to manage that as much. It's like the character's simpler, but it offers more complexity when you need it. So I really like transformation classes. I love that Hooded Lay and Oh Nightmare did the werewolf. They did that really tastefully. I think it's a bit too powerful in certain respects, maybe underpowered in others, but that's what you get. The game is not perfect. Modders do the best they can, and I think so she kind of worked on this sort of cloak ninja idea thing that I had, and it's going to be exciting to see that. Otherwise, it would be a transformation character. I don't know exactly what it would be. I love that so I just have to throw this out there too. Action Jack did make a class called the Ironclad. The Ironclad is literally a mech, okay? Which I think is so cool because it fits a lot of my theme, but it's literally a mech built by engineers in the hamlet in a shop owned by Muscarine, and they were like in a dungeon and they found the blueprint and they were like, what is this thing? They went to Musk's shop, they built it in the hamlet, and it is literally like a Darkest Dungeon mech that is very steampunky in the sense that it has a drill and it's kind of like shaky and movie, and I just thought that's really creative and inventive. AJ has done some really, really cool conceptual things. I think a lot of his stuff needs a little bit of fine tuning, but then again, everybody's a critic on the modded stuff. So I love that idea, and I don't have a great answer other than probably would have been a ninja or transformation class, but I love that somebody did a mech, basically.
I do agree that with the introduction of the Shield Breaker, where they introduce stealth and cloak mechanics into Darkest Dungeon, that a stealth-based class playable is probably in the future, and something like a rogue, ninja, assassin of that nature, I do see it happening probably within the end of 2018, whenever the next DLC major expansion is going to come out for the game. I would just
Yeah.
love it to have like a sneak attack sort of mechanic similar to how it is in like Diablo 3, World of Warcraft, Dungeons and Dragons in general, where it's just, all right, are you stealthed? Cool, your next attack automatically either crits or deals a percentage
Right.
bonus damage. Something like that, I think, is kind of necessary. Where it's a character that you literally have to forfeit your your first turn, to set up for turn 2 burst.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that idea. I mean, I think that's kind of what we're seeing in the modding community. There's something that you brought up there that's important to note, which is the modding community has only had the tools that they do to create this stuff for a very short amount of time. So the stuff that we're going to see released in the next couple of years, certainly in the next couple of months, but definitely in the next couple of years too, is going to be phenomenal. And it's amazing to be on the front wave of it. You know, I mean, Marvin Saye was about to release his own dungeon, and I mean, we leaked a couple of the bosses, some of the stuff that he's been developing for the monsters for that dungeon. He's been live streaming on Twitch the animation of those characters. It's phenomenal stuff. I can't wait to fight it. I can't wait to play with it. And the mechanics are only going to get better and better. And with the new DLC, you know, you've got the new endless mode that they're putting into the game. So that's going to change everything. The whole horde mode, where you try to last as long as you can and kind of run a gauntlet, is insane. I love that idea. I also think we know that this is the last DLC that's coming for DD. Our Red Hook is moving on a new title soon, and
Yep.
I don't know anything about it. So the fact that they're kind of doing a send off with the last DLC, which is here you can play something that never ends, I kind of love that too. So we'll see what kind of mechanics and things come from that as well.
The next Red Hook game is going to be a side-scrolling mech fighting game.
Is it really?
We can only hope.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would be into that, obviously. Yeah.
Red Hook, hit him up for that collab.
Yeah, seriously. God, I would love that.
You already kind of answered this question earlier, but we'll see if there's anything specific comes to mind. If you could adjust any character or ability in the game to either make it more playable or maybe not as overpowered, if you had to fine-tune anything in the game, what would it be, and why would you make that selection?
That's a great question. There's so much to say there. And you're right, we did kind of hit on a little bit of it. I mean, you know, most people when I started playing the game talked about how overpowered the flag was, the flagellant. And I had no idea really what that meant until I started playing it in Pitch Black Dungeon. And then I saw how reliable, like in Pitch Black Dungeon, I use it as a primary healer, as a primary tank, as a primary bleeder. It is insanely survivable, insanely useful in so many different ways. And then you go to the vanilla game and you realize it can actually reach up to rank 3. So it can actually hit the back line with its abilities, which it can't do in Pitch Black Dungeon. That changes everything, because now you can bring that to bosses where you have to reach rank 3 or 4, like the Hag, right? Where the pot is position 1 or 2, but the Hag is in 3 or 4. You can now bring that character there because it can actually reach that far. So that's insane. But I try to be humble about this, because even though I've beaten the game and I've played a lot in the last 4 months, it took me a long time to realize the utility of a Houndmaster, for example, and that it can just be played in any of these groups and it fits in so many different ways. So I try to keep that in check, because even though I look at some things and I go, that seems insanely powerful, in a lot of cases, it's just very powerful in certain circumstances. And in many cases, it's limited in others. So another thing that would be worth changing for that purpose then too would be, I think the number of provisions that are provided in the base game. When you go back to base game after playing Pitch Black Dungeon, I mean, in Pitch Black Dungeon, you basically get to have one bandage, one of anything for the most part. You get some added stuff. You could buy potions and things like that, but you're limited as hell in terms of what you can buy. And that is part of what enriches the experience of PBD, because you're forced to really think about, should I use a bandage to stop this bleed, or am I going to is this bleed going to grow and it's going to be more efficient later? So when you go back to the base game and you can just buy 9 bandages, you're like, this is weird. I think it throws people off when they first try Darkest Dungeon, looking at the provisions and going, what the hell do I buy and why? It's a lot simpler in PBD. So that, I think, could use refinement. I would love if they would add affixes to the base game. of like they have in PBD. Maybe we'll see something like that with the endless mode.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the endless mode, the gauntlet run, is going to have waves of things with different affixes. I think that would be totally appropriate. And then probably you could change the religiosity aspect of the game. I mean, this is a world based on Cthulhu and H.P. Lovecraft, and so there's a perfect arena there for mythos and for backstories and all this stuff. And it makes sense to me that some of these characters are going to have backstories that just don't work. They just don't like each other. Some of them are religious, some of them are not, etc. But there's something frustrating about the limitations in that system, and that you just don't get to play certain characters. I'd say lastly, I would love to see the leper get a little bit more love in the base game, because literally, I mean, it is what it is, and a lot of people see it as a meme and they say party only, which is insane because you can't do anything to the backline ever,
Mm-hmm.
for the most part. But it just seems to me like a character that is really cool in concept and in backstory. It fits DD so well, but just doesn't quite get enough love, and is really dependent on accuracy trinkets. And I think anything that's dependent on trinkets to perform well seems to me to be not powerful enough. So I don't know. I think that's probably the places to start. I could go a lot deeper in some of these abilities, but those I think are some pretty good starters on things I would.
I agree with one of the points you made, that getting rid of the whole religious restriction within the base game, I think, would be a good step in the right direction. Because the fact that, again, my favorite class to play is Abomination, can't play with the main healer, can't play with the Crusader, can't play with the Flagellant, which is another great healer. Yet they're perfectly fine going with a Hellion character, which Hellion, their trinkets and even their abilities are all about renouncing religion and whatnot. They're like, you know what, the Hellion, you're okay. You have a good stun.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great point. I mean, the funny thing about Darkest Dungeon is it's not perfect. You're never going to find perfect balance. You're never going to find. I mean, I'm not somebody who believes in perfection or certainty. There's just working as hard as you can to get as close as you can to what's really, really solid. And there are finicky things that happen in DD all the time. I think the religiosity thing is one of those things. Another thing that we've run into is the way that you have to get invitations to go into the Crimson Court. The Crimson Court DLC is great. It really scared the hell out of a lot of people. It was really, really difficult and challenging for a lot of people in the beginning. They kind of rebalanced it, retooled it. People got used to it, learned how to manage the curse system and all that stuff. And it's an amazing amount of content and artwork that's really should be appreciated. One piece of it that's been a little funky is that it requires invitations to get into the Crimson Court. And that means that you have to let infestation get high first, so that Crimson Court mobs spawn in the regular dungeons, and then you got to find a gatekeeper, kill the gatekeeper, who will then drop an invitation, and then you can go in. And when we were beating the game the first time through, we literally beat everything we could, and then we waited to do most of the Crimson Court stuff. So we did that. Then we went and killed everybody but the last Crimson Court boss, the Countess. And because we had just killed the previous boss, infestation was nowhere. We couldn't get to a gatekeeper, and all of your invitations go away. So literally, we just spent 2 days streaming, farming over and over, grinding and grinding to get to a gatekeeper, to get an invitation to go and try to kill the Countess. So I mean, that's an instance where it's just like, maybe this just wasn't quite thought through enough. There could be a different system to this, and ultimately we just installed a mod that prevented the necessity of that invitation to go in there, because it wasn't interesting anymore. It was just taking too much time. So yeah, not quite perfect, but close enough.
All right, which version do you prefer to play, standard or PBD?
Boy, this is a difficult question, because actually, right, there are actually tribes here. If I say A or B, I'm absolutely probably going to be hissed at by opposite groups. So I have to be a little bit careful here, because the truth is that as a streamer, I definitely enjoy the challenge and the excitement and the flow that comes with Pitch Black Dungeon. There's something about it that is just unique, and not everybody's doing it. A lot of what you see on Twitch and by streamers who play Darkest Dungeon is the good old Blood Moon torchless run, and that is
Yep.
cool. That is challenging. It's something I've never done before. I would like to do it. It's a vanilla game thing. I've just never done it, and part of the reason I never did it is because the Blood Moon difficulty, if you don't know, comes with weak limitations and character death limitations. So if you're doing modded content, like having modded classes into your gameplay, and there's constantly new things coming out and things are being tweaked, that never fit the paradigm of the stream. It never fit the structure of how we wanted to do expositions for content and things like that. So to move into Pitch Black Dungeon, which is modded content, and there's a huge, an amazing team behind it that is constantly working to retune it and to rebalance it and to reconfigure it. To be a part of that is something really, really special, because you see constant management and refinement, and that's all you really want, I think, out of a game company. It's just that they're constantly paying attention to what should be fixed, what should be retuned, etc. And you get that out of the PBD community. You get that out of people like Claire de Lune and Rael and all the guys who have worked on that. So I think, right now I'm really jaded about the base game. I have played Pitch Black Dungeon. I've taken down a couple champion bosses. We are going to beat it in relative time here. And every time I go back to the vanilla game, it's shocking and for the most part uninteresting to my audience. So that is difficult. However, without the base game, we don't get to experience so much more modded content because it's just not balanced for Pitch Black Dungeon, right? I mean, that's the thing about PBD is we play something that is extremely tuned to itself. When we go back to the base game, now we have an open arena. I mean, it's like Apple and Windows. It's like Windows is such a massive, right? I mean, it's so widely available that everybody has it, everybody uses it, and there's something about vanilla too in that aspect that it's so available to everybody that's the way you're going to try a lot of modded content. So yeah, I love what vanilla is. I love what's done in vanilla. I love what Red Hook did with it. I love the modded content that's available for the vanilla game. Right now, I'm jaded about it, and I am loving the hell out of screaming in my sleep playing Pitch Black Dungeon, losing group wipes to bosses and bad affixes like damnable. So yeah.
Fanboys of Darkest Dungeon, put down your pitchforks, go back to Hamlet and await further orders.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Yeah. The base game just never gave me nightmares, I think would be a succinct way. Would be a succinct way to say that.
I did get one legitimate nightmare from the base game. This took place, it was early October. I was doing a 12-hour stream for an Extra Life event with a group of friends, and I was doing a 12-hour stream of a whole new Darkest Dungeon playthrough. And it was there that I met the Shrieker for the very first time ever.
Ah, yes.
And I'm just like, what's this random mission in the Warrens? Or no, Weald. I'm like,
yeah.
Shrieker. That looks kind of cool. Says it's champion level. Whatever. I'll take a group of level 3s. Everything will be fine. They're drinked out, doing provisions set up and everything. I'm like, all right, well, I don't know how long. It says it's short, so I probably only need this much food, this much torch, blah, 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 blah. I'm instantly there in the fight. I see it has like 70 dodge and that much hit points, and the nest has that much protection. I'm like, I think my best character has accuracy of 100.
Yeah. The Shrieker, that's a good one. I mean, the funny thing about DD, just as a small aside to what you're saying, is it's about learning, it's about psychology, and it's about trauma. And the thing about it is, every experience that you have in DD is one of those where you go, what did I just walk into? What the hell is it? It just crushed me. Now I need to do it differently. And that's what's so challenging about it. You don't get your hand held through much of it, or any of it in many cases. You just kind of walk into it, get crushed, and go, okay, now I know how to do this a little bit differently. That is the process we are in right now with Champion PBD, and that's what makes it so difficult. That's what makes it so nerve-wracking. The first time I played through the base game on Radiant, it was nerve-wracking. It didn't give me nightmares, but it was nerve-wracking. Now when I go back to it, I immediately do torchless with wonky groups at the highest difficulty, and I just try to make something interesting happen. So yeah, it becomes a little mechanistic, but the first time is always terrifying, basically.
What region in the game do you find the most satisfying to do a dungeon crawl? Whether it's the type of mobs that are in there, just the scenery, the lore, everything about it, between the Warrens, the Weald, the Ruins, the Cove, and the Crimson Court.
Wow. So impulsive, like immediate answer is Crimson Court because it's new, and because I kind of like the vampiric lore that they did behind it. I mean, just once you understand what it takes to not only like artistically create the characters that exist in the game, but then to animate them using a program like Spine. If
Mm-hmm.
you know what these modders are capable of, you watch Marvin Sayer, you see Muscarine's stuff, and you see how they animate these characters. You walk into the Crimson Court, and your jaw is agape. You are blown away by the subtleties, the animations, the intricacies of all the characters, the backgrounds, the feel of that place.
Mm-hmm.
It is something very different and something very special, in my opinion. Other than that, I kind of have a little bit of love for the ruins, because the ruins is kind of, it's iconic a little bit, I think, to Darkest Dungeon, because the ruins is just, it's that decrepit castle ruins feel that is very dungeon crawly, and uh it's just filled with stress and skeletons, and especially in Pitch Black Dungeon is one of the most punishing places you can be, because the skeletons resurrect. So if it's just so much more difficult to deal with their corpses. The stress is so much worse in many cases. So I kind of love the ruins. The ruins has a place in my heart, but I definitely really, really admire and am in awe of the work done in the Crimson Court these days. The Weald is one of those that I never, because the Weald is like mushroom-headed people,
Mm-hmm.
and it just feels different. There's running jokes in my chat and probably across Reddit in general about why people don't just burn it down. Why didn't you just burn down the Weald, right? Just burn the forest down. And I mean, it's kind of, yeah, okay, maybe, or maybe that would have just completely polluted the air and polluted the city, etc. You never know. But yeah, I think Crimson Court is probably my place of choice to hang out aesthetically and lore wise. But other than that, I think it's the ruins. I also just really like the ruins bosses. I've always been a fan of the necro thing, of the reanimated skeleton thing. Something about that turns me on. So,
What
did
has?
you ask
Hmm?
about least favorite also there? I missed that.
Uh, I was just asking for your favorite, but if you want to throw in your least favorite,
Okay,
go for it.
Cove.
What's wrong
The
with the
Cove is my least
cove?
favorite. The Cove is cool. It's very cool, very different. It's just that I've been punished the most there, I think.
You never have
Um,
enough shovels.
it's the shovels, it's the bleeds that you get from the fish. Literally, I have walked into a group of four pelagic piranha, I think is what they
Mm-hmm.
are. The swordsmen, right?
Yep.
I've walked right into a group of four of them. I've been surprised, and they've literally hit character two, again, dead before I had any move. So there's something really, really terrifying about the Cove. That's both just the stress, the bleeds, the shovels,
The
uh,
thralls.
the thralls, yes, that kind of stuff, right? It's that kind of stuff that I just feel like every time we go into the Cove, it's a slog. It's just going to be different. It's going to be a different kind of challenge. However, I do love that they put the Cove in the game, because lore wise, the idea that there's like a sunken mariner, ghost shippy siren thing is unbelievable to me. I think it's great. I mean, it's so enjoyable. So yeah.
All right. What has been your most memorable moment in any of your Darkest Dungeon playthroughs?
Oh, geez. So, I'll just make this clear. I'm in my third of three playthroughs right now, right? So we started 4 months ago. We beat the base Radiant game
Mm-hmm.
with modded classes. Then we go back to that every once in a while for modded stuff. Then we started the darkest difficulty version of the base game for modded content, which is our alternative run right now. So that
Yep.
run right now is purposed specifically for checking out new modded content that is only playable in the base game. Something that we're doing as an event, and we have been doing for the last couple of months, is the Sayo special runs, which is basically Marvin Sayo has challenged me to take his 4 modded classes, run them in one single run all the way through the courtyard, and kill the boss there using his
Ooh.
group and only his group, and only one run. So we did that for the Baron. Then we did it again for the Viscount. That was a 6-hour dungeon run where we had a Death's Door we had to get rid of. We had an Affliction we had to stress away. It was an absolute nightmare. And probably tomorrow night or early next week, we're going to do it again and try to actually kill the last boss, the Countess, in one run with the Sayo special. I totally forgot your question. What was the question?
What was what's been your most memorable moment in any of your playthroughs?
Thank you. I'm getting lost in the fear of having to actually accomplish this mission now. So that was really memorable. To get through that is why it's partly why I brought that up. To get through to use his group, which is a great group. He did a fantastic job with those modded classes. To use only that group as a self-sustaining, sufficient group with enough damage and all the camping skills and all that stuff to get through the entire courtyard in one single run. We had almost no blood left. We literally had one blood remaining by the time we got to the end boss. We had to remove an affliction. We had to get all this stuff done, and then we just absolutely crushed the Viscount. So that was really, really memorable. I am still in shock about the 2 out of 385 health where the entire team died to the Prophet, the champion Prophet in PvD. I don't know that I'll live that one down. I mean, that one hurt so bad.
I actually showed up after it happened. I think I hopped on like maybe 10 minutes, and you were still like traumatized by the whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, a big aspect of my stream is I try informative and positive. I want people to come here and enjoy watching me fail through it, but also handle it as gracefully as possible. And the thing is that like I don't typically get salty. I didn't even really get salty about that one. I just turned it into a lesson and said, we lost these characters, we'll get these trinkets back, but it's painful. It's just that when you think about what goes into leaving a boss alive, a champion Pitch Black Dungeon boss alive with 2 health out of 385, when you think about 2 different hits hitting for 1 more damage, when you think about the last blow that we dealt was literally 2 damage away from the lowest roll possible.
Yep.
Right? You think about having one character that wasn't afflicted, so I could have marked it for 3 damage. I mean, all this stuff just runs through your head, and you go, "How the hell did that happen?" And then, like, you know, the outcome of that is people go, "You idiot! You idiot! Like, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you do all this?" Like, because I knew that we were playing a specific strategy, and it looked attainable, and we were leaning into it. And by the point where your characters are all afflicted, your chance of retreat, anyways, is so minimal. A successful retreat rather, that it's often not worth it. So you kind of become committed, and so that one's a huge one. That one is a really big deal. Obviously, finally killing the darkest dungeon, beating the game the first time was really memorable. We did that with Muscarine's group, so the Profligates, which was something I think both as a tribute to Musk, because he'd become an incredible mod for me. And he actually made safe for work skin versions of his classes specifically for my stream, which I thought was just an amazing, amazing thing to do. So that was a really memorable run. And of course, everybody in the community was just, I mean, they were just, you know, completely celebratory for that whole thing. They were excited as hell. So that was really, really memorable. Yeah. And then we did the cannon the other day, the champion cannon, which I barely escaped with 2 characters at death's door. And, I think was like a turning point for me, because for the most part I don't come out of that with my brain intact, and I go into bosses with too much adrenaline. So that was memorable because I got to actually escape that time and think. I'm actually thinking through the game now and not just like being adrenaline pushed through it. You know, I'm not just being too impulsive. Those are I think if there's any, let's see. You got me thinking now, because so many crazy things have happened. We did a Pitch Black Dungeon Fanatic the other day. So the Fanatic is a rare boss that can spawn only if enough of your characters have the Crimson Curse. It's a percentage chance to spawn. It is one of the craziest and most amazing bosses in the game. It is specific to the Crimson Court DLC. It literally is a religious fanatic who has a cross or not a cross. He has a stake that he puts your teammates on and then burns them. I mean, it is insane. And when you're in the fight, the background is a field of people burning to death and just screams and crying and music, and your heart is in your throat when you first encounter it. And Rael decided to try and adapt it for Pitch Black Dungeon. It's a different fight, and it absolutely crushed my soul. It killed 3 of my teammates, and 1 person survived with about 5 HP left and with a complete affliction. And yeah, Rael and I had a really, really big conversation about the balance of it after that, which was kind of fun. But yeah, everybody, that was the first time I think in Pitch Black Dungeon everybody was watching on my stream and they just saw the group get destroyed. So that was pretty memorable.
Victorious commented in regards to your whole battle with the Prophet to give you props is much more helpful for new gamers, herself truly, in that regard. When you see people who have been doing this game forever get beaten, but not be distraught about it, use it to learn, it helps keep you positive later and helps keep viewers interested moving on beyond that. So she just wanted me to pass that message on along to you.
That's great. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's very well said. I mean, that is definitely what I try to bring in my stream, is a sense of just learning the game. You know, this is a game where, in a similar way to the way that I move through the streaming, you just lean into it, let the net present itself, and just release the machine. Just try to move through and learn what you can, and just put the trauma, put the anxiety, put your emotions at bay for a little bit, and just try to keep your head. I talk a lot about the poker mentality, which is just trying to play your strategy, keep a cool head, and know that sometimes you're gonna get bad draws. Sometimes you're gonna get bad luck, but if you play it right, it should work out more often than not. And I think that where people go wrong in Darkest Dungeon and in a lot of games is that they get too much ladder anxiety. They don't see the bigger picture enough, and they get too focused on the single loss or the single death or the single whatever. And as a streamer, I mean, these are actually really entertaining and fun moments anyway. So thank you very much for that comment. I appreciate that.
For me, for most memorable moment, it's tied between either that Shrieker that I was telling you about, where
Yeah.
the moment of confusion, because the Shrieker actually managed to kill three of my party members. I had one person left on death's door. They are afflicted already. I'm like, well, here comes a wipe. The thing flies away. I'm just like,
yeah, for sure.
What? What just happened? I'm on stream and I'm literally just freaking out, going, "Did I beat it? What? Ah!" And the second one was on that exact same run. I was doing a siren fight, and I took a leper with me in position 1. And I wanted a leper for damage, but I intentionally took an arbalist, and I had a bunch of trinkets that increased my debuff resist. Because if your debuff resistance is high enough, she can't charm any of your people. You just burst her down, and she's absolute garbage. So I had an arbalist with flare, which gave your party a debuff resist bonus as well. On top of it, I had the whole composition built. I took a camp beforehand. I got my leper pumped all the way up with all his damage. Like, he's just going to chop and hew her to death. It's not even going to be a damn issue. First charm. He has, like, I think plus 50% debuff resistance and everything from all the buffs and everything I put on. He instantly got pulled over. He hewed my front two guys, crit on both of them, and now my occultist and I think it was my Houndmaster in position 2 were both on death's door immediately from full health.
Yeah, that's a great story. Something I think or say about games is mechanics always win, and at the end of the day, the Siren is one of the most terrifying bosses, purely because to take something from your team that you have just completely buffed up like you did and see it torn back at you is it's party ending. We regularly run the Cove in Pitch Black Dungeon for the purpose of Siren farming, because you can summon bosses, mini boss versions of them, on curios. The other night we found 2 Siren curios. The first one we absolutely annihilated. We just annihilated. The second one stole, I think it was our Highwayman. The Highwayman just immediately crit to death's door with the bleed, one of my characters. I was so lucky to get it back and then just leave that group. And I mean, I was sweating balls, right? I'm just completely out of my head. So that, mechanics will get you, and that's a great one. The first time you ever accidentally summon a mini boss, which is a boss version, right? It's a boss, but a mini boss version in Pitch Black Dungeon accidentally. The first time you ever do that accidentally, you are in shock. And the first time I ever played PBD, they encouraged me to put herbs on one of the etched flesh in the Warrens, which of course summons the Swine King, and I had no idea, and suddenly we're in a Swine King fight. That was terrifying. We lost 2 characters there. So yeah.
So you've been streaming you just hit 4 months recently, correct?
Yes.
And right now, I don't believe you're partnered yet, but it's looking pretty promising that partnership with Twitch is probably in the near future. What are your plans for the channel, for your community, just the direction for the games you plan to do once you get partnered by Twitch?
Oh, it's such a good question, and it's such a dream. I mean, that's really the goal here. Is I I sort of set out that if I'm gonna actually do the streaming thing, I want to give it a shot. I actually want to try and see if I can do this full time. I mean, I think that's probably the dream for most people who do this. Um, I don't know. The idea that partners is something that's promising is still something that feels like a figment of my imagination. It doesn't feel real. I think that I definitely feel like it's a possibility. So I have some ideas down the line. I've definitely got a lot of design and fun things that I want to integrate with the channel, things that I want to just make the experience a more positive, more fun, more engaging place. I think that partnership will help that in a lot of ways because, as you know, with affiliation, while that's a nice stepping ladder for people who just want to get into it and try it out, it really is kind of a proof of concept, and you're not given much in terms of incentives for people to support you, much in the way of emotes, etc., the things that make Twitch kind of hot, right? The
Mm-hmm.
things that make Twitch kind of fun. So I feel like partnership for me means opening the door to the realization of a lot of things that I just can't do yet for the channel. A lot of things that like emotes and things that are going to be really, really fun and tied to the way that not only the games we play and the things we do on my channel, but things that we're going to do down the line. I'm always going to be playing games, I think, that facilitate a decent platform for my brand or for what I feel like I do successfully, which is heavy engagement, having a sense of being able to explain what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
break it down with people, get their input on it. That is what I absolutely adore about Twitch. That's what I think Twitch thrives on. That's why I think live streaming is challenging TV in so many different ways, and probably it's beyond that already. So I'm always going to be, I think, headed down that line. Like we are going to be doing. We're in the middle of an expert Cuphead run through. That is something completely different from what I'm used to.
Yeah.
I mean, we're halfway through the expert bosses. I'm shocked as hell that we've gotten that far through them. I love the hell out of that game for a lot of different reasons, but it is one of those games where you are just holding a controller, like, and you can't pay attention to anything. You can't talk to your audience. You can't hang out with people. So the good news is you can pause it. The good news is you can kind of come out of it. It's very left field for the kind of thing that I like to do. So FTL is a big one. XCOM is another one. These are games that don't have massive audiences, but have a similar feel and play style to Darkest Dungeon. And I'm thinking that those are things that we're going to branch into a little bit more. Actually, the creators who made FTL have another game coming out pretty soon, which seems kind of similar to another turn-based thing coming out, I believe, in this month, I think. So yeah, so that's a really great question. I do know that I am in the middle of a project with several other streamers that's kind of a stream network. I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to see that grow, and we're even talking about maybe doing something involving consulting and helping other streamers get off the ground. So that might be something I become a more a part of. But I feel like all of this stuff just hinges on making that partnership goal. So we'll see. It's a great question, but honestly, I'm so focused on the now and just making the stream something entertaining and fun to be a part of that I should be looking down the road, and I'm not. I'm not enough, you know.
I'm going to say entirely on ElementFive's behalf, when he hits partnership, he will stream his first playthrough of Doki Literature Club on his stream. I'm just going to say that right now.
Love it. I love it. Thank you for that.
No problem. And now, the final but most important question of this entire stream. You're ordering a pizza.
Yes.
How much pineapple?
Oh God, how do I walk out of here and not be a meme? How do I walk through this and not be hated by one group? How do you what's the politic answer here? I mean, the funny thing is, so here's the thing.
The answer is enough.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe enough, or maybe even half has pineapple. Here's the thing. Okay, I worked pizza for a while. So before I went to college for psychology, I did 6 years of delivery in a small kind of mom and pop pizza place. It was a New York style pizza. I really enjoyed the spicy, thin New York style, even though I'm a fan of deep dish, etc. But something we got a lot of was ham and pineapple, right? The Hawaiian pie. I wasn't totally into it, but it was free, and it was constantly something that was being ordered and either rejected or for one other reason or not just didn't get taken. So it was free, it was up on the oven, and anybody could eat it. And I got pretty used to eating it. In fact, there's a place, there's a chain here called Bojo's. I don't know if it's outside of Colorado. It might be. I might be an ignoramus here, but their specialty is adding honey to what they do. So that's like a whole other step of sweet to pizza, and that is definitely an experience when you have something very salty and cheesy and fatty, and you get a little bit of honey on top. Is thing. So I'm okay with the pineapple. Okay, I'm all right with it, but I understand why some people it's just not their bag. So I will say some pineapples okay, maybe half the pie. That's gonna be my safe answer.
All right. Once again, thank you very much for your time tonight. Hope you had yourself a good time. How's your migraine doing, by the way?
Oh, thank you for asking. Much, much better. I've had a couple this week. They're come and go. They're blind spots typically. I had one in the middle of my stream last night, which was a real challenge because you know how it is as a streamer. You have multiple monitors, multiple windows, the chat, and the gameplay. A lot of times I feel like the truth about streaming that's the most difficult is when you're watching somebody, it's easy to criticize what they're doing, what they're playing, what they're saying, etc. You don't realize how much multitasking and energy goes into streaming. And tonight was one of those nights where I was just knocked out so hard by the migraine yesterday, I didn't have the energy to put the show on. So I'm much better. Thank you for asking. It has been a blast to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity. I hope we can do it again. I hope we can talk about this stuff again because it's fun to talk with somebody who knows their darkest dungeon as well as you seem to. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Basically, I actually feel a little bit sad in this regard because I got onto the Darkest Dungeon bandwagon when Crimson Core came out. It's when I started seeing people, like a lot of top-name streamers for both League of Legends, Hearthstone, PUBG. Everyone started streaming Darkest Dungeon as like their in-between game. I'm like, what the hell is this? It looks cool. That's pretty. That looks nice.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there watching playthroughs, and people will play for like a week, and then they're like, all right, back on to a different game now. I'm like, no, I want more of that. That was so cool. So I finally got the game myself. I was playing it, loving it, getting my ass kicked, kicking its ass. It's a constant tango between me and the game.
Of course. Yep, that's what it is.
And basically, it's been so difficult for the past, I want to say, 6+ months to find a dedicated streaming base for Darkest Dungeon because there is so much replayability within the game, especially with the Pitch Black Dungeon, which I actually discovered that following your stream. It was like 3 or so months ago, I think. Maybe not even that long. About 3 months sounds about right. But I was looking on like Darkest Dungeon streams because Filthy Robot, who was a pretty well-known name for the genre, doesn't stream it anymore, and a few others had already left. And I see ElementFive. I saw your view account was pretty decent. I'm like, all right, where's Pitch Black Dungeon? Is he doing like a no light run? But that's just what he's titling it. That's pretty cool.
Right.
I go in, and the first thing I see is the Hollow and Alami. I'm like, what the fuck are these things?
yeah, right.
And I've been stuck on your stream basically ever since for Darkest Dungeon content, so it's been an absolute blast. Once again, this interview has been a blast. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for saying that, and again, thanks for having me. It's a ton of fun. Really appreciate it.
And maybe once you get your partnership, we can return back to this interview with hopefully some more deep diving in questions. And
let's do it.
Maybe a few more party wipes in your campaign's future.
We'll see what happens with dude. That's supposed to be even more challenging, and I think so. So yeah, plenty of opportunities. I can't wait. I would love to come back.
All right, thank you very much. You have yourself a good night, ElementFive. And for those of you watching the video, go ahead and plug your stream just one more time. I will have annotations for this as well on the video when it comes out. Oh,
sure, yeah. If you want to come by and see the madness, definitely come by twitch.tv/ElementFive, obviously one word. You can also find me on Twitter at E5Games, easy to remember, easy way to get a hold of my schedule, all that good stuff. Follow me on YouTube as well. I just got my YouTube channel going. A lot of episodic content, a lot of highlights from the stream and from Darkest Dungeon, and right in the process right now of doing guided gameplay, commentary, things pertaining to my thoughts on the balance of characters, etc., etc. So that's going to be pretty fun to do. Both the Discord and YouTube links are on my Twitch page, twitch.tv/ElementFive.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. I will be taking a brief break as I have some beverage, use the restroom, and once again, thank you, ElementFive.
Yeah, thank you.
You going to be streaming tomorrow night, most likely?
Tomorrow night we'll be on.
All right. I will be catching you there.
Okay. Take care. Thanks.
Bye. So